Well, hello, and welcome to the Retrospective by HeadlessCreator.com, where we review a real-world headless project with the actual team that implemented that project. I'm Marcelo Lewin, the Headless Creator. You can get a hold of me right there, Marcelo at HeadlessCreator.com. In today's retrospective meeting, I'm speaking with the team from Matter Supply, which worked on the Eeyo eBike e-commerce global site project. That's a mouthful right there. Now, with that said, let's bring on the team. Guys, welcome.
Hello.
Glad to have you here.
Hello. Glad to be here.
Thank you
Morning.
for being my guinea pigs on the first retrospective meeting. I appreciate it. So whatever happens, it's all good. I'm really excited to have here. So why don't we start? We'll start with a little bit of introductions here. Let's start with Mikey. Tell us real quick a little bit about you, your role in this project, and a little bit about your background.
Yeah. I'm Mikey. I was the account manager on the Gogoro Eeyo project. Worked at Matter Supply now for about over 4 years. I'm here in Portland, Oregon. So I was responsible for making the connections with the clients, scoping, and kind of managing from a high level all of the drama that happens with clients.
All the drama. We can do a real TV show based on that, right?
Oh, yeah.
How did you get into tech, real quick?
Kind of through the back door. I worked in business development in food and beverage, business development in intellectual property. So came into Matter Supply and started drinking through a fire hose of learning all of the stacks. We've been working on headless sites for since our inception. So it's been a really, really fun learning curve for me.
Best way to learn like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep, totally. Cool. Steve, what about you? Give us a quick overview of yourself.
Sure.
Your role.
My name's Steve. Live in Portland, Oregon. I was the project manager for this project. I've been at Matter Supply for slightly over 3 years.
And how did you get into tech?
Right out of college, I used to work initially at my first job. I worked at a record label. And then we hired this vendor that set up our new website, but also set up our e-com experience too at the time. And I kind of saw it as a gateway to, one, I was working on that project. And I started to kind of learn how sites were built. And then I asked for a job at a certain point, and it was with this agency that was working on the site. And the lure at the time was, they were doing our site, but they were also working on a lot of video games, with EA and THQ. I was really into that back then. So that's I got a job with them, and I started kind of there, essentially.
Very cool. And by the way, we've got to say that Steve is a little bit under the weather today, so we're super cool of him to be here still and not bail on us. So that was super cool of him. Well, thank you, Steve. Sebastian. Tell us about yourself, where you're located, the whole thing.
Yeah, so I'm Sebastian. I'm a software engineer based in Medellin, Colombia. I've been working on software development for the last 8 years, 5 of those with Matter Supply.
And I see you are a Lego fan because I see the creator behind you. So you can see I have the same thing here. It's not a creator, but
I've been planning on putting it together for months now. And
you got to do it. For the next retrospective, Sebastian, we're expecting that, man, okay? Don't fail us. Cool. All right. Well, welcome, guys. Real quick, Mikey, tell us real quick a little bit about Matter Supply.
Yeah, so we're a digital product design and build studio. So we really focus on our process, and we play well with other agencies. This is a good example of a creative agency that didn't have any kind of development chops that brought this project to us, and so. Yeah, Matter Supply, we're mostly builders and designers of digital products.
Cool. Well, let's do this. Let's get started. First up, let's tell us a little about the project, what it was. Tell us what Eeyo is. It looks like an e-bike company, obviously.
Yeah. Here in the West, most people don't know the name Gogoro. Gogoro in Taiwan is a household name. They have a really cool business model where they actually have electric Vespas that are all around, and basically when your Vespa runs out of battery, you just go to a Gogoro station, they swap out the battery, and immediately, and you're back on the road. Of course, right? That's super cool. They have all this technology around electric motors and design, and they, with the emerging e-bike market, they designed the hub. So they have a bike here as well, but the key here is this hub that ostensibly can be put onto any bike, and it connects to an app on your phone and helps you do an e-assist. And they were rolling this product out globally to see where it hit. So the technology is pretty cool. I have this up on the actual live site. So this is the hub, so this project was launched in the US, in Europe, and in Asia, all at the same time, with a lot of focus on the technology itself. The bike.
So there was a lot
really
of localization on that. There was, I'm assuming, huge localization. So what was the problem before? I mean, was it a redesign, the main thing here, or was there a total revamp?
Yeah, for Gogoro, this is from scratch. Gogoro, like I said, it's a household name, but Eeyo is brand new. So it was something that came out of the research and development department.
Got it. Okay. Cool. So there was no problem before with the current site. Basically, they wanted a brand new site to launch this Eeyo and do that. Okay. So why don't we start with, and maybe this is for either Sebastian or Steve, the tech stack. What did you guys choose for that?
So we built a Gatsby site using React mostly. And also we had, for the e-commerce part, we use Shopify. We actually integrated with Shopify. We use Prismic as a CMS. That was a nice CMS that we worked with. And and I think that covers the tech stack.
Can you tell us why you chose one technology over another? I mean, what was the decision-making process there?
So
like starting with the Headless CMS, let's start with that.
Yeah, so Prismic in particular, I think we realized that Prismic will work really well for the authors, and like for this specific project, we wanted to prioritize the authoring experience, making it like really easy to implement. We have worked with other CMSs in the past. I have used Contentful a lot, and I think Contentful works really well, but I think the risk with Contentful is that sometimes you make it like for the developer, like you structure it in a like really technical way, and it's not that easy for the author later to digest. And then we found out that Prismic might be like a really good solution for that case. So that's why we went for Prismic specifically.
Okay. And then you said, what was the others? The Shopify?
Shopify, yes. I think on the Shopify side, that was a constraint on the client. I think they had some previous relationship with Shopify, and that was their way in because they already had some logistic set up with Shopify for the distribution in Europe and in the United States. So that was their proposal. We were looking into other e-commerce platforms, but then the client pushed for Shopify.
I see. Mainly because go ahead.
I'm going to jump in here because before it got to the developers, there was actually some discussions. They had come to the table with a Taiwanese-based Shopify competitor, and which was kind of a struggle because they were really pushing for us to use their local, which it wasn't. As we were looking at it, able to do everything that they needed it to do. And I think if they were just launching in Taiwan, it would have been fine. And so we...
do you remember some of the drawbacks to it? Without getting very specific, but I mean, was it more of a language localization barrier or...
Well, there was... The main issue was much like Shopify 1.0, and now Shopify has gone very far into the future. It was only able to essentially customize themes, right? So our early designs were not able to really apply, which meant that we were going to have to create a layer, essentially build an API for them, for their system. and all of their documentation was not in English. So
Got
even
it.
if we did try to do that, we were going to have different developers come on. And to your point, it really wasn't engineered to be a global solution. And so there's a little bit of a struggle in the beginning, which is hard with clients sometimes to convince them of something different than their early assumptions. And so Shopify ended up, because they of course have their API already built out.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more about that, actually, Mikey. How did you go about convincing them? I mean, did you do a POC with it, or tell us about that process.
We met with the team from, I think it was called Shop something. I forget the name of the competitor, and had them run through, because they were adamant that it could be used. Of course, it's their software. They said, "Oh no, you can be done." And so we had them show us, their pathway. They weren't thinking of headless sites at all, right? And the brief wasn't to do a headless site. That was just the right solution. And so we met with them. We talked with the vendor. We talked with the internal developers at Gogoro. And in the end, what's nice about tech is that the thoughtful decision usually gets honored, because more than ego, because you do want the right solution.
Well, not always, but I guess you guys lucked out. Yeah, not always. Yeah. So we spoke about the headless CMS. We spoke about the Shopify. Were there other pieces involved in this? Did we have a PIM? Did we have a CRM? Any other internal systems that had to be part of this tech stack?
No, because at the beginning, the site was actually meant to be only like a promo site. The project actually mutated a lot of times. There was supposed to be like different phases for the project. So the first phase was only a homepage. So it was just supposed to be a static site. But then because the pandemic hit, Gogoro had to like shift priorities and then like make the e-commerce side faster than anticipated. So there was like a lot of like shift in that process. And initially it was just supposed to be like a landing page. And then we had to start like implementing the e-commerce part like sooner into it. So it was like mostly landing page with the e-commerce.
Now, from the technology perspective, is open to anybody. On the front end, what did you guys choose from? Because you showed some really cool animations. I'm assuming it's fully responsive. Can you tell us a little bit about that front end technology?
Yep. So at Matter, we use React a lot. We feel comfortable using React over other frameworks.
Any particular reason?
Animations, I think the community is larger. Like in my personal like preference, I think the community is larger. You're gonna find more documentation, third-party libraries that you can use to like not reinvent the wheel. So I think there's a lot of content out there that you can just like reuse, and then there's also a lot of documentation that the community is really helpful with like the stuff. So one of the most interesting parts on the tech side was maybe the animations. For the animations, we did use a couple of third-party libraries. I think one of them was Scroll Magic, because there was a lot of scroll-driven animations on the project. It was a fully responsive project. Mikey, you can, yeah. So
got it.
Like that one was.
So that's a library that you used to do the.
Yeah. We in that one specifically, we had like these sequence of images that we just like show and based on the scroll position. There was another fun and maybe one of the like most challenging animations. Mikey, can you go real quick to the homepage? And when there's all like the bike, like the full bike with the dots, that's like a really cool. Go down a little bit more.
That's actually cool. I see how you're doing it in between the letters too. How it's scrolling in between. It's not all on top or below. It's up and yeah.
That one, and then like was maybe one of the most challenging pieces on the front end, because all those dots, they are actually configurable on the CMS. So you can like
Oh,
basically position any of those dots in the CMS and then link an image to that dot in the
so you
CMS,
can
and then that's
position
going to
that
show up.
dot anywhere. You can move it wherever you want in the bike.
Yep, exactly. You can move it
And
anywhere on
does
the.
the author have like a little UI where they can actually see the bike and position it, or?
And no, that would have been amazing.
Yeah.
Then we would have to create like a custom plugin for Prismic, and
Got
yeah,
it.
that was a little bit tough. So we entered just like the position, like for the
Right.
like a proportional position given the image of the bike. That would have been amazing, but no, that didn't happen in this case.
Right, maybe for phase two, but yeah, definitely. Well, I like to hear that you guys really put a lot of effort into the authoring experience, because I'm a big proponent of authors, right? And most of the time people forget the authors and they just focus on the developer. So that's really cool. Okay, on from a team, let's jump into sort of the team description and the roles. We cover some of your roles, but obviously this is a big project. So maybe Mikey, you could tell us real quick, what were all the roles involved in this project from your side and also from Eeyo's side?
Yeah, yeah. So there were two. Well, Gogoro has plenty of people to talk to. But there's two main guys, Eric and Sean. Eric was stateside, an American guy who worked for Gogoro, who was our day to day. Sean was his boss, so he was the stakeholder. So when we presented to Sean, we had to make sure that we were buttoned up, and Sean was very straightforward by the book. Actually, great to work with, but expected a lot. The creative came from an agency called Cinco, and so we had a UX designer staffed throughout the whole project from their side, as well as some production design from our side. We had, of course, Steve on the PM role, and then we had two other developers. Right, Sebas, there's three altogether on this. Yeah, and I believe we had some. We like to delineate project and product managers, and we had product help as well, that not full time, but we had a product manager as well.
So what did the product manager focus on?
Steve, tell us a little bit between the difference between a project and a product manager.
All right.
Yeah, the product focused more on strategy,
Okay.
from what I recall, and then myself, basically everything else focusing on the schedule.
You're the guy with the whip, making sure. Yeah.
Delivery, milestones, the budget.
Right.
Running this. I actually ended up doing a lot of the Scrum work too as well, so kind of hands-on.
Yep, definitely. Now, so there were a lot of people involved here. From a communications perspective, I'd like to talk about, how did you guys communicate within Matter Supply? Then how did they communicate at Eeyo internally, right? And then how did you guys, because you mentioned another agency, so there's a lot of moving pieces here. Just talk to us about the communication. How did that work? How did you guys, what technology or what apps did you use to communicate? What worked and what didn't?
Yeah, I could take that. So right when we started like full on production, it was kind of weird, because it was basically when the pandemic hit, so everyone was at home. So for the most part, internally, we used daily stand-ups. So it'd be myself and our team, all the technologists, QA, etc. We'd have our daily stand-up. We'd also use Slack a ton. We had a couple channels, but internally we had our own. We had an external channel that we talked to with the client on the day-to-day.
So you use like Slack Connect, I guess, that.
Yeah, and and then they had access to some things.
And for your stand-ups, did you guys do a Zoom or?
It was always through. It was usually through Google Meet.
Google Meet, okay, but
yeah,
something like that. Okay, cool.
And then we would meet with the design team, so Cinco, that Mikey mentioned, probably several times throughout the week, was the usual cadence. And then once or twice a week, we would meet with Cinco and then with the Gogoro team, which was a bit of a challenge because they were in Taiwan. So
Wow.
that
Yeah.
that meeting would often be really late at night. So it was I think the time difference definitely was a challenge, but we had a pretty strict cadence, I would say, throughout the
How
entire
did you
project
manage the
communication.
schedules though? You got Taiwan, you've got Sebastian in Colombia, you're in Oregon. I mean, you got
Yeah.
people all over time zones, right? How did you manage all of that, and how did most people show up?
Yeah, and I think at that point we were just kind of used to it because at Matter it's kind of divided up within Americans, uh, typically on the West Coast, but then the Colombian team, the technologists, which are either 2 or 3 hours ahead. So we were all for the most part used to just the time difference,
Hmm.
and I think we had some practice too because at the time we also had another project going on where that just started that were in Australia. So
Oh wow.
kind of the same thing where we just knew what we were getting into and we knew that there were going to be some um, timing differences that we were going to have to just get used to.
Right.
And then with the schedule, kind of the same thing, if we were going to need something for the US, it would be specific as far as like when a US something is going to launch versus when something's going to need to launch in Taiwan. In fact, I do remember the main launch when we launched everything, because if I recall, we kind of launched this in pieces, where it was like a preview stage and then it was like a full-on Shopify is being added to it. When we launched that for Taiwan, I think we all started our launch call because again, this was fully remote, probably like in May of 2020 or whenever. Um, we started at midnight and we worked through the morning. It was
Mm.
actually kind of fun, but the time difference kind of kicked us in our ass at that point.
Right. 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 Totally. So, what worked well communication wise, and also the opposite of that coin, right? What didn't? What do you think you guys could improve on? When I say you guys, I mean all the teams, right? What
I
could
can
be
start with that one
improved?
too. I think what worked well was we were really getting in our groove with working full on remote. Everyone was remote because we had to, because the world was shut down. Um, what was, but I think at certain points it was a challenge. With, like Mikey said, it was us doing all the production work, but then sometimes we felt like we had a middleman, and that was the design company.
Hmm.
And there were definitely some points where we had it was a challenge where the the main client Gogoro was kind of in the shadows, um, where we didn't have full access to them yet. I remember we did eventually because I think Cinco finally started to realize that we need to be able to talk to them
Oh,
one to
so you
one.
went through layers to get the message across.
Yeah,
Ah,
so it,
yeah.
it was it was a bit rough, and I do recall that was kind of hurting us at certain points of production. But towards the end, we and when I say we, I mean like myself and Sebastian were able to talk directly to the client.
How did you guys remove those layers? What did you guys do to remove
Um,
them?
Go
the
ahead, Mikey.
I yeah the and Sebas mentioned this too, that the client had, and this is not uncommon, but the client had some shifting over time. The ask kind of changed in the middle, which is hard because you want to, we have this SOW, it's this, it's that, um, uh, and after our initial launch, so we actually had two phases. So then we had another contract that was directly with Gogoro. So we over time basically got to know Gogoro, and then the high level design was done. We had all the components, and we're still on great terms with Cinco. We didn't like take it from them, but it got to the point where the next phase was just with us and Gogoro directly. And so our second contract was direct, and so that took time to basically um, uh, get through all of the design, everything to be approved to the point where it was just down to production design, and getting into actual iterations in the site.
Got
Yeah,
it.
and I think it was a lot of that had to do too with just trust. At a certain point, um, at least the vibe I was getting was Gogoro wanted to talk directly to us. So that's what happened. We delivered the site and we were working on next phase iterations, that sort of thing, where it was just us. It was like Mikey said, it was the Matter Supply team and the Gogoro team, and it was just like a one-to-one relationship, and it was actually really nice.
Yeah, I find a lot that sometimes trust is what stops people, and they want to get in the middle always, right? They're like, okay, I need to know what's going on. So how did you guys build that trust? How did you go about that?
I think part of it was initial, like once we started production, when we thought that things were final,
Mm-hmm.
that they weren't. And there was a lot of back and forth as far as is this the final design? And we would do our rounds, and then we would get another version, and then maybe another version. Um, and I think part of the problem was some of it was coming from the uh, the design team, and then some of it was coming from the client. And I think they started to realize that it was really starting to bog us down. Plus, we needed to deprioritize things because of that. When they started to realize that it was having that sort of like ripple effect, is when I think we started to, from what I recall, uh, get a little bit closer to talking more one-on-one with the client and being able to explain to them like, no, we could do this and we could do that. However, we're going to need to deprioritize kind of like XYZ stuff. So it's like,
Right.
those real conversations started to happen. So, and we were being as transparent and honest as possible. So I think they started to realize like, okay, um, we need to be able to start having those clear lines of communication with the production team with us. So I have a feeling I think it's all started from there basically.
Yeah, makes sense. Let's switch a little bit on the subjects here on budget. Let's talk about budget and how much of an influence was the budget and how you guys decided to solve the problem. I mean, you went with Shopify, Prismic on the front end. You had React. How much of an influence did the budget have on that?
Yeah, good question. They never get. Sometimes they come to you with a budget. In our case, they didn't come. They came with like an idea of what it might cost. And Gogoro is a big enough company, that they understand how much things cost. We, but there were some change orders, right? And with that trust that Steve was talking about, they understood why, right? When they come and say, oh, it's supposed to be, marketing page, now it's e-commerce. And so it's really just kind of an ongoing conversation. But what we do is when we put together a budget, we're staffing against time and with the deliverable. And so I think they liked our rates, and I think that they trusted that they were getting good value. And so budget is and will continue to be always a clincher. And but in this case, some projects tend to be very, very budget driven, and this was within reason. And with the communication Steve was talking about, we were able to over time just continue to do, whether it's a change order or a new SOW. And I think by the time we handed everything back, so they have an internal team in Taiwan. By the time we turned everything back over to them, they were really happy, and I think they got a lot of value out of what they spent.
If there was less budget, would this have changed any of the tech stack at all? Or
Maybe not the tech stack. Let me think about that. Well, Prismic tends to be, and I think we do a good job of trying to find the one that isn't going to be incredibly expensive over time. And Prismic is a pretty good one. Shopify API kind of is just what it is. I think we deployed using Netlify, which can be expensive too. But the stack, I don't know would have changed. I think what would have changed would have been how much cool animation stuff, or how many markets and languages we were deploying in.
Yeah, and allocation. It would have been a smaller, tighter team for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, fortunately, I feel like we the budget was good, and we probably went a little over when it came to hours on our end. But again, this was middle of the pandemic, and just the agency world at the time was like, what the hell is going to happen? Are we going to all be out of work by like Christmas, like everywhere?
Right.
So we were kind of going for it too, knowing that if this is going to be one of our last projects that we ever work on for a while, we want it to be awesome.
Right.
So it was almost like the perfect team setup for this project. So like we gelled really well, and we ended up delivering something that was really awesome. So yeah, I mean, I was watching the hours, but at the same time, I was just like, we got to just do our absolute best on this one, and hopefully everything works, and hopefully we could also use this as a centerpiece for some additional work moving forward, that sort of thing, whatever.
Right. Right.
But yeah, we definitely, there was definitely a lot of midnight hours put into this thing, but it was because we really liked actually working on it. I think that really helped too. Everyone wanted this to go extremely well. So yeah, we put a lot of effort into it for sure.
So let's talk a little bit about deadlines and timelines, and tell us what were the deadlines. How did they come to these deadlines? Sometimes companies tend to just pick them out of thin air and go, "Oh, we should go live that day," and you don't know why, or were there specific reasons to go live at a particular date? And also, did you guys meet them? And if not, why? What caused the delays? I know that's a lot, so I can repeat some of those questions.
I want to say we met pretty much most of them. I created the schedule, the second part. Again, you got to keep in mind that we were working with this design company, so they already had their own schedule, their own PM. I worked with their PM at Cinco to basically establish benchmarks as far as how we're going to run sprints, whether we're going to do sprints versus Kanban, and then how are we going to demo this stuff as things came along. And then there was, from what I recall, some specific launches that needed to happen that may have been pushed only because things changed. I think at a certain point, like Sebastian mentioned this too, that I think the launch date did change. Unfortunately, I can't remember. It was definitely due to some marketing stuff, but we launched this in I want to say midsummer, so it wasn't like that ridiculous haul, like got to get this up by Thanksgiving or something like that for the holidays. But yeah, it was essentially me and their PM establishing deliverables, due dates, and when we were going to start to demo stuff, because we wanted to make sure that Cinco saw it, that the client saw it, so that they were able to visibly see where we're at, and they always had access to the schedule. But we did push a few things out, and I think it was some launch timing based on what they wanted to add, because I think at a certain point the scope did get bigger. We added more components, we added more features, and we ended up delivering like a pretty big site with an e-com, so that was extended a little bit. I don't want to say by a ton, but it definitely happened, but because they wanted more.
But the delay was on their end. Basically, they wanted more stuff, so it delayed sort of that. One thing I did forget to ask you guys, was there personalization involved in this at all? And if so, did you guys use a personalization engine or?
Not that I recall, Sebastian.
No, maybe no. There was no personalization engine. Like maybe the closest that we got to that was on the custom e-commerce like implementation that we did. We would allow the customer, the user, to select a specific bike and then add the accessories to that. That was it. I think in other projects, Matter actually like work on customization stuff. There was this project where we did it, but that didn't happen for the.
But there was nothing
the
based on
project.
buyer personas or anything like that, or on region they're at, or.
No.
Okay. Cool.
Well, we did. I mean,
yep.
We did. There is analytics throughout the site, right? Endpoints, and then there is localization in the sense where we know where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So to know what site to bring up. Obviously, there's different e-commerce rules depending on where you are.
Is all the translation handled on the Prismic side?
Yeah.
Yes.
And do you know if that's a manual translation, or was it automated through, let's say, like Google Translate or some external translation service?
That was a manual translation. I think the client wanted to have more control over the wording used on all the text.
How many locales do you recall?
We planned for 4. We planned for English, Chinese, and I think it was French and German. I think those were the 4 instances that we set up in Prismic. They ended up using only 2, only English and Chinese.
Why is that? Do you know?
I think the partners that they use in Europe for the distribution ended up like they had like a different system that they wanted to use, so they got all the components that we implemented, and then they just like put them in a single page to link it to their internal e-commerce systems, and that's what they decided in a couple countries in Europe. That's as far as I know.
Yeah,
and I remember that was a challenge too, because when we're getting the translations over, it's obviously a huge difference character count wise. So the Chinese language was breaking a lot of our components, especially when it came to it being responsive. And I remember it wasn't breaking all over the place, but it was breaking in certain important areas like headers and whatnot. So that was definitely something to get used to. I mean, that kind of hung us up a little bit in certain phases of the project.
Well, this actually leads me to my next section, which is about research and training, right? So from you guys' perspective, how much research you had to do? Like, for example, you said Chinese, right? So understanding React and how that works with Chinese languages. And also from their end, did you guys have to do any kind of retraining them, like content authors, right? I don't know if they're used to, on a previous site, if they're using a sort of monolith or a more traditional CMS, that they have to be retrained into sort of a headless CMS and how that works. Tell us a little bit about that research you guys had to do, and what kind of training that you guys went through and you had to provide to them. Whoever wants to take it.
I can answer regarding the training specifically, because I remember we did a lot of sessions with them. It was like a lot of handoff sessions where we walked them through documentation, like technical documentation.
This is with the developers?
Yes, with the developers.
Okay.
And I remember, I think it was developers and a couple more roles on the client side. And then we went over the CMS, and then we would explain the relationship between the different entities of the CMS and what they would translate into on the final side. And then we would do like multiple sessions to make sure that we would cover like all of the components.
So were these like Google Meet sessions that you provide also documentation in written format, or videos like Loom videos or any of that kind of stuff?
Like all of them, like we would record the meeting and then just share the meeting with them, and then also hand off like a document to them.
Yeah, it was very manual and step by step when it came to the training. From what I recall, we had several of them. So basically, once the site was launched and things were good to go, we needed to basically hand off this entire experience to the Gogoro team. So yeah, exactly what Sebastian did. We had several hour to 2 hour sessions with them, with explaining how the CMS works, how all the backend works, how everything works, how Prismic works, and then training for that, so they could take it over. And I remember, even for me, it took a little time to get used to Prismic, but because prior to that, well, at least I was used to more Contentful, but it was somewhat of a smooth transition. But
so you guys had to do some training as well in
I
that
did for
end.
sure, yeah.
Yeah. And when you said training on Prismic, was it mostly focused on the technical side, or did you guys also were in charge of training the authors, the actual how to create content, how to manage that content?
I believe it was both.
Both. Okay. And did they have multiple channels besides the website, or is the website the main channel?
For this project, it was just the website.
Okay. Yeah. Are they planning on using the content on this project coming from Prismic and any other channel, or are they sticking with it mainly on the web?
No, honestly, I don't know. I think they might be sticking it mostly for the web. I have a feeling probably.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Cool.
And I think that changes regionally. I don't even think that, I think they disabled the e-commerce portion of the US.
They did.
Maybe earlier this year we noticed, and clearly that's a business decision. We
Right.
had no idea. Yeah.
What went well with training and what didn't? What did you guys learn that you could do better next time? Training the customer, I mean, or even yourselves, actually.
I think it was pretty solid. I think the challenge was the training was they were all foreign. They were all on the Taiwan side, so there was definitely a language barrier for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a feeling that the main client that we worked with, Gogoro, was very fluent in English, pretty solid. But everyone else, there were several other people there, and sometimes they wouldn't talk. And I'm almost positive it was because of the language barrier.
Right.
So overall, I think that was a challenge because, from what I recall, it seemed like a one-way conversation. Where obviously we were doing most of the talking, but there weren't a lot of questions, or as many as I expected. So often there would just be like silence, and again, I think that was because of language barrier issues.
Right, right. And sometimes it's a cultural issue too, right? Where different cultures will act a different way in meetings, right? Sometimes silence means approval, whereas, right, it could be that, yeah, as well.
And then on
So
occasion,
did you
we'd
find
get
that?
follow-up questions.
Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
We would get follow-up questions after, kind of like to your point, where they probably they wanted to wait, and we would either get a Slack or email about certain
Right.
things. So the communication would go that way too.
Right. Okay, believe it or not, we're at 45 minutes, man, and we could go for another hour, actually. You guys have been great, but let's start a little bit on closing it up here. So overall, looking at the entire project, what do you think went well? The thing that went well the most?
I think I'll start. I think production on our end went extremely well. Like I said, this specific team gelled really well. And we definitely, like, again, we put in the hours, and I think delivery was pretty solid. What didn't go well was midway, again, like I said, some of the communication, just having that wall between us and then the design team and then the client, that was difficult. And we were having a really tough time with certain aspects of design that were delivered to us as final, but then we'd get like 2 or 3 more versions. And then I think in one case we ended up just like killing something and wasting just a bunch of time. So I think we could have done a little bit better as far as like putting our foot down and prioritizing things during certain segments of the project.
So,
for sure.
So that's interesting you said that. So on the final, then there's the final, and then there's the final, right? But why did that happen? Was that because it truly was the final, and then the customer looked at it, a day later and goes, you know what, we changed our mind? Or was it something else?
Honestly, I don't know. Because we were working directly with the design team and the main designer, who was actually really great. But I feel like it was like we would hear one thing sometimes, and then we would do exactly what was requested, and then it was seen, and it was like, no, let's do this instead.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of back and forth like that. So
right. I don't know if I like it until I see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. I think we, and me personally,
and that's pretty
standard. Did a better job with just kind of like prioritizing that stuff at the time. Right. But we went through a couple of difficult rounds in the early beginning.
Yeah. What do you guys feel needs to be improved on? I mean, it sounds like it's that communication, which is typical of every project, right? But in this particular project, do you feel anything specific should be improved on for your next projects?
I think we probably have. I think the difficulty I was having with this is a lot of us have worked on a bunch of projects since. And we definitely learn from from this one, but like the specifics I'm spacing on right now. So sorry.
That's fine. No worries. Let's talk about the biggest win. What was the biggest win?
Overall execution for me. When we delivered that site, man, it got a lot of attention that we weren't really expecting. You know, when when we were working with the design team, that their huge influence, like everyone else's, is usually like it needs to look like the Apple site, right? And we honestly delivered something that was on par to that, in my opinion. And yeah, the animations were awesome. The pages were slick. The Shopify experience was like badass. It was a really tight site, I thought. And yeah, so I would say like overall like delivery of the project, I think went pretty well.
Sebastian, what about you from the technical side? What was the biggest win?
So I think it was my dream project. I think we got to do a lot of stuff that we wanted to do in past projects, and we finally got to combine all these things. So like I think generally that was like a win for me. So for instance, we wanted to do some automated snapshot testing on the app because, for instance, we wanted to make sure that as we were introducing like some changes, we were not breaking other stuff. So we were able to automate a lot of stuff, and we've been wanting to do that like in other projects. So we got the chance to do that here. Like we enforce a lot of rules and like in the way we were working with the team, like in a nice way, and like that way of working was like went really smooth, and we were able to introduce like a lot of like practices that we want, like combined practices from learnings from other projects, and we got to do that in the Gogoro project. So I think that was a huge win for us.
Steve, what about, or Mikey, what about the biggest learn overall?
Yeah, I think for us internally, I remember testing was a huge thing on this project with all the changes happening, and how many different sites there were, versions of the same site. And so, getting into the automated, just really utilizing all the automated testing tools that are out there and really kind of pushing the envelope there. And then for me, sometimes saying hello to a client's hard, but also saying goodbye to a client is equally hard. So anytime we have a client with a good year-long run, and you leave on good terms, we do keep in contact with Gogoro still. So anytime that you have a, there's always gonna be ups and downs, but a positive relationship, and you leave with a still positive relationship, that's a win.
Very cool. From the testing tool perspective, any tool you want to call out specifically that really helped you guys that other teams should consider? I mean, we're not marketing for people, but it's good to know what tools are out there that you recommend.
We use Cypress a lot. We use Cypress for automated testing, and we ended up using these tool called Chromatic. At some point, we were using Percy for the snapshots, and then we ended up moving to Chromatic, which is actually supported by the Storybook team, which is a nice tool, because we ended up building a component library for the project, and Chromatic was a really nice tool.
Cool. All right, guys, we're pretty much at the end here. You guys have been fantastic. What should other teams not, or you guys should not do next? What did you learn that you never do this, that we did do? And here's why. Anything you can think of?
Yeah. Always make sure that QA looks at something first before it's shown to anyone. We did a lot of rushing in certain parts, and we were definitely getting the whip from QA, understandably, but thankfully he understood. But yeah, it's an obvious statement, but it's true. Just always make sure that QA looks at something first before it goes out to anybody.
Mm-hmm. That's a great tip. Anything on your end, Mikey?
Oh, for me,
for managing the client,
managing expectations. And again, it's hard sometimes when you get brought in by a design client who says, "Here's the moon." And then we say, well, we can't exactly do the moon, but we can get, we have a rocket ship, we can get halfway there. And so I think just managing expectations, again, with the understanding that there is that communication barrier, and that you do need to work on the early stages to break through that as quickly as you can.
Right. Sebastian, on your end, don't do this technical side.
I think do not underestimate the size of the assets of the project. So I think we ended up getting the final assets at the very end, and then like the size was considerable, and then probably there was like an overlook on that side, and then that had a huge impact on the load time on the website.
Oh, so we're talking about media assets, the media assets.
Yeah, exactly, the media assets. Yeah, we ended up having to do some optimization on the assets afterward, but then like when I think that was maybe not considered at some point, because like the assets that we were dealing with, they were like not that heavy, so like probably that was going to be fine. But then like full resolution assets that we got like at the end, they had a huge impact on like the performance. Yeah, we ended up having to do a lot of optimizations.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. All right, guys, we've come to the end. Thank you so much, Sebastian. Since I have you here, that email is the best place to get a hold of you.
Yep, and you can also find me on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn, cool. How about you, Steve?
Same, steve@mattersupply.co, and then just to search my name on LinkedIn.
Awesome, Steve. Thank you so much for being here. And what about you, Mikey?
Same. Yep, Mikey at Mattersupply. And of course, LinkedIn too. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks to the rest of you for being on our very first retrospective. Man, I found this so much fun. I learned so much. It was awesome. Stay tuned. Excuse me. Stay tuned for many more retrospective meetings coming soon. If you have a project, get a hold of me right there, Marcelo at headlesscreator.com. We'll chat and figure out if it should be on the retrospective. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you on the next one. Have a great one, everybody. Cheers.